Okay, Sean, I was wondering if you guys are still in the process of making roster cuts or if you've completed that at this point.
Now, look, we're finishing up that process, none of which will be released or announced officially here till this afternoon. It kind of began last evening and then continued this morning. The deadline is this afternoon, and we'll be at our number when that comes.
I know you touched on this yesterday, but how do the logistics of the roster moves work when you're all evacuated at the same hotel? Do the players get to start, keep staying there? What is that process?
Listen, it's a great question. So let me just give you an idea. For instance, we know tomorrow will be our last day at this hotel. It doesn't mean there won't be some players and or families that decide to stay a little longer. There'll be a great number of players that are going to go to other home cities. They'll have that time, call it tomorrow till Sunday, kind of get organized and be prepared. Sunday, our whole team, as well as the practice squad, will report back to the area that we're going to set up, kind of our practice facility. And I think we'll have a better handle on that in the next 24 hours. So, you have some players that'll be flying home today. I don't think anyone is returning to New Orleans. And so, obviously, there's cars back there. There's personal items for a lot of these players. But in the short term, I think it's the itinerary that either takes them to a home city, takes them maybe to where they're planning on being for the next 4 or 5 days. And I think there'll be a handful of players that will plan to just stay here in this area. We'll get all those logistics taken care of. And then certainly the travel for Sunday back to where our main base is going to be. And I think we'll have more information for you guys on that and obviously our team on that in the next 12 to 24 hours.
Sean, what are some of the things you guys are? What are some of the things you guys are considering and looking at when you are deciding where to set up that next space?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Logistics. If there was some discussion out west, I think the reason that doesn't make sense is the 2 away games we play are at Carolina, at New England. So I don't think it's in our best interest to go to California or Oxnard, for instance, and then know that we're going to have to return here to play somewhere in this area, a home game, whether that's in New Orleans or somewhere else, and then make 2 East Coast trips. So ultimately, accommodations and more than likely an indoor practice facility, because if you're not somewhere where you're not going to have rain, and I just bring up Southern California, for instance, the weather's pretty consistent. There's a lot of other areas then you've got to be prepared for, rain or inclement weather and still be able to get your practice in. So, hotel accommodations, indoor facility. We've had examples of this when we went to Seattle, a couple of years ago. If you recall, after Drew's injury, we stayed in a community right across the lake there and practiced at, I think we were at Bellevue at a hotel, practiced at University of Washington. So a lot of times some of those college facilities, the college teams are on a different timeline than the NFL. And typically they're getting a morning practice in because of classes, or they're getting a late afternoon practice in because of classes. So I know when we were, for instance, at Washington a few years ago, they were done practicing long before we ever got there to work out. And so, I think we had one day where we might have seen just the tail end of a practice. So we've explored a number of colleges relative to their facilities and also their practice schedule. And it keeps coming back pretty consistently. You know, that there's teams that are practicing 7, 8 in the morning, and then teams that are practicing 4 in the afternoon. So, you know, logistically, the hotel, an indoor facility that matches schedules, and those are some of the base logistics, really.
Sean, how far out are you all planning this worst case scenario?
I would say, look, we're starting with the idea that, let's just say, Jeff, it's a month. Let's say I think it's much easier to reel it back in, but what would that mean? That would mean, you know, prepping for Green Bay week 1, prepping for Carolina week 2, prepping for New England week 3, and then prepping for what is a home game against the Giants for the 4th game. So I think we're looking at, all right, just the first quarter of the season, the first 4 weeks, knowing that we can always adjust if need be. You know, certainly we know for at least the upcoming couple weeks. So we're not looking past that, and really that's not a challenge logistically for these places. It's really more of what's the schedule look like for these schools. If we're looking at, you know, schools like SMU that would be in Dallas, TCU that would be in Fort Worth, you know, what's the availability of at&t Stadium during the week if we kind of came back Sunday at another location around here and worked on going back and forth. Now, there's some events there. You know, when a concert's at one of those venues, that typically means there's a setup, a breakdown. That makes it a little bit more challenging. So I brought up 2, either Fort Worth or Dallas location universities. And there's a few others that we're also visiting with. But I think to answer your question, we're looking at really the first, you know, call it 3 or 4 weeks of the season.
Can you speak to the expense that owner Gail Benson is incurring here? It's got to be exorbitant.
Yeah, look, you know, if you're, I can't. I'm not on that side of it. You know, typically, if you're at home, there's an expense. Obviously, it's different when you have a facility, you're not using it. You know, it's just one of those rare instances where, you know, it happens to a team where you're displaced. It's happened before, I think, in our league outside of hurricanes. It's happened before because of fires. You know, I'm trying to think of other examples where teams have had to alter their schedule or their practice setup. And I know historically we've seen that before on the West Coast with fires. We've seen it obviously with us before relative to hurricanes or Houston or maybe a Florida team. Tampa Bay, Miami, I think experienced it. You know, it's just one of those things that has come up. I couldn't, I wouldn't have the insight relative to the amount, but she's been fantastic and very supportive. And, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here. So obviously there is an expense with that.
Coach, real quick, what are the Saints covering for players on the road? Is it hotel and meals for the entire family, including the players? I just wanted to get a sense of what her buy-in is.
Yeah, all of that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, all of that right now. You know, yeah, I mean, look, I went down for breakfast today, and, man, there is a freaking ruckus going on, and there's about 15 kids playing touch football in the meal room, and it's kind of, I don't know how you describe it, but it does bring a group of people together. You know, you're trying to give them information, make the best of a situation like this, and you're getting a chance to meet family members and children that maybe you never normally would meet, either player to player or coach to player, or you know, I mean, you see a lot of these people at games, but you know, collectively, you don't see as many like you do in this unique environment. And then moving forward, you know, again, a lot of it will be dependent on, you know, when is the city ready to receive, you know, people to come back? When are they legit? You know, when are the When's the power back up? When are all the things up and running again, at least for people to return? And we don't know the answer to that yet.
What about the players that were cut this morning? Has Miss Vincent and the Saints offered still that hotel and meals package for them right now? How's that working out?
Yeah, so look, every team in the league today is doing one of two things. Every team in the league is reducing the rosters to 53, and then after that takes place, they are putting together a practice squad that really takes 24 hours. This time tomorrow, teams are waiting to see if any of their players were claimed, and so that usually takes a day and a half. There are a group of players that were released that are beginning to head, home to wherever home is, and there aren't. Those players are not going to be candidates to be on the practice squad, and so no different than if this was happening in New Orleans. You would get them set up with their airfare and their tickets and their destinations. What's the unique thing that's different for that group of players that's getting ready to depart? Maybe there's some items that they have to come back and get, or we have to ship from New Orleans when we get back to New Orleans at the training camp hotel. So there's not a big change for the players being released and going home. They're leaving a different city and going home, and that's just what's the flight schedules in and out of either DFW or Love Field. That process is well underway and already begun. I think the challenge. Well, no, I think the challenge though is, and I talked about this as a team yesterday morning. It is a little unusual for all of us as a family to be together with families and the entire roster, and then something as important and significant as making a team or not making a team, and being in the same building and finding out that that you're going home, and logistically that becomes a little bit more difficult. And I think you just got to be open and upfront about it. And look, we were able to, in a very short period of time, travel a large group of people to a safe spot, and these circumstances are unique.
Quick question for you. I know you guys have gone to places like San Antonio, Indianapolis, Greenbrier, even Oxnard. While those places might make a lot of sense, as someone who's covered the Cowboys, I know Oxnard certainly would as well. Is it your preference to be a little bit closer, and as you mentioned, TCU, SMU, and even at&t Stadium, given that it's worked for you?
Here's the process. Let's start with Oxnard. We've been there before. I was at Oxnard when I was a part of the Cowboys staff, and man, there's a lot of positives there. They've done it for so long, and there's a comfort in knowing someone understands exactly what you need, meeting room wise, meals, and all of those things. I think the challenge with Oxnard, I said in the beginning, is gosh, we're relocating there and then playing 2 away games, literally in Charlotte and New England. So for something that's going to be, call it a 4-week plan, if for now, or a 3 or 4 week plan, I don't know that. I was kind of moving in that direction, and then you start looking at the schedule and think, those are 2 long trips then that we're taking on the other side of the country. So we've kind of moved on from that. Indianapolis has got a Guns N' Roses concert, and that presents an issue with some other events in their stadium. Greenbrier's got a commitment. I think the 49ers open up on the East Coast somewhere and then are going to stay there for a week and then play Detroit in week 2. So you're kind of there's a series of looking at these and then eliminating some, and then it gets back to, well, look, there's a chance that if our stadium's not ready to host the Packers in week 1, where might that game be? And there's a chance that game could very well be right here at at&t Stadium. And we've got enough fans in this area in Houston, and certainly from the northern Louisiana, that we think that would be something that's very realistic. So back to, a major city with 2 airports that gives you a lot of flexibility. 2 programs locally here. When I mentioned that, be it TCU and SMU that have reached out that completely would love to be a part of, helping us and hosting us. So it's almost like a 48-hour, you're beginning to arrive at certain decisions that really make a lot of sense, as opposed to maybe in the very beginning, because I know we started with some early thoughts of being out west. I think the away games quickly changed our minds relative to that, where they were at, and then some of the logistics with some of these other locations. So it's a process, and we're getting closer here to where we think the best fit is. And even for, let's say 8 to 10 players that on Wednesday decide, hey, you know what, we're going to stay in the area here, and we'll see you guys back on Sunday. We'll be at a different location hotel-wise. That's great. That becomes easy as well.
Sean, you touched on this some with the chance that the game could be here, but how heavily would you weigh the benefit of being able to practice in the same city or same area as your week 1 game?
Yeah, look, I think, it's just reduction of travel. So look, if we're practicing here and you told me that our game was right here at, I keep wanting to say Old Texas Stadium, but it's at&t Stadium. If our game was there and you're practicing here, that works. Look, if you were nearby, I don't know, in other towns, call it Nashville or Houston, or that just means you're probably taking a trip Saturday, a short flight, and you're getting ready. So, look, I think it lends itself to being more convenient, certainly.
Sean, it's hard to believe this ended up on the back burner for the last week, but did you inform your team and your quarterbacks of a decision at the starting quarterback position?
Yeah, I didn't have this sit-down official announcement, tap the microphone, stand up in a team meeting. We just don't operate like that. And I think our plans right now, and much has been already said, but Jameis is going to be our starter. He's done a great job. He's earned that. Both he and Taysom competed their tails off. Certainly, it's always difficult when you don't have the full off season that you're looking for, or the full preseason. But we feel real good about that room. We've got 4 players that are going to be a part of that room. 3 right now, and a 4th, we think, and we'll work through the numbers there. But yeah, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate how those guys have handled it, and it's challenging. It's hard in our league when you have a competition like that, because it's not the norm. And it seems like this year there's 4 or 5 teams that are either having it with a rookie player or maybe a veteran player like we had in our case. And you're really wanting to go through that process and give these guys as much of the opportunities and the reps that they need. And it's not always perfect, but yeah, we were able to do that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
What really stood,
Mike?
What really stood out about the things you wanted to see Jameis Winston improve, I guess, this offseason after you had a year to work with him? Yeah,
look, I think the number one thing is leading your offense and moving the ball and scoring points. And, we feel like he's got the unique skill set with his arm talent. Boy, he can get the ball down the field. He's done a really good job of working through some of the progressions. And then, a lot of that falls on us now, because one of the challenges, and much has been written about it, is they're 2 entirely different players. So, going into games with 2 different kind of mindsets relative to how do you help each one play well. And so, we'll look closely at the things that we feel like Jameis does really well, and then very closely at the things that how we want to utilize Taysom in positions we want to play him. And make no mistake, it wasn't. I know this was asked a lot, and I understand the question relative to, well, if Taysom is your quarterback, you're going to lose all the other things he can do. But yeah, that's true, and yet we couldn't make the decision just based on that, because if Taysom were to become that quarterback and continue to improve, and I do think he's going to be in that room working at that position, but we just wanted to look at it completely from an open eye standpoint and just trust our gut with it. Those guys handled it well, and I think our teams handled it well. And so, for something as significant as that, because that being the starting quarterback, and we've seen it with some of these other teams, it's kind of taken more of a backseat a little bit with everything else that's gone on. But, they're both real good football players, and we're going to need both of them this year.
How did that conversation with Taysom Hill go, and how did he take it, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked for a while, and it's always challenging, disappointing, and yet I feel like we got a real good dialogue with him. He's been here long enough with us now, and I think the very first thing any player wants to know is, what's your vision for me? What do you see? And I also think they want honesty in your evaluation. They want honesty in the vision, and so I've got a very clear vision relative to how he's going to help us this year, and no different than the vision we have with Jameis. They're just both going to be; those two are both going to be extremely important if we're to play well and win games this year.
Sean, would
one of them
either of the quarterbacks have been active in the final preseason game, or would they have been rested?
Yeah, look, the plan for the final preseason game was going to be to give Trevor, a good quarter and a half, and then move Ian in. So the plan was going to be to not play Jameis or Taysom this third preseason game. Obviously, we didn't get to that.